Welcome to Kibbe on Liberty. This week, my friend Eric July is going to help us work through all of this craziness that is going on in the streets of our cities. We have lockdowns and now we have riots. And can you tell the difference between peaceful protesters and looters? All of that stuff is stuff that we libertarians and constitutional conservatives and people that just don't want to hurt anyone or take their stuff, we got to figure this stuff out. Welcome back to the show, Eric.
Hey, man, I appreciate it. I mean, it's crazy out here, but, I do appreciate you having me on, man. It seems like it was way too long since the last time we got to chat.
Yeah, you were one of my first guests, and we had a really cool conversation about some of your founding intellectual influences, particularly Walter Williams, and I'm thinking about him right now in the context of his book, The State Against Blacks, which, as I recall, was one of your sort of important moments.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just his write-ups were amazing. I mean, in any context, it's, it's being this far down the line and, you still picking up some of that stuff because some of it does ache the community. Some of it does warp what we do. It kind of highlights how we have a warped perspective on a lot of this. And unfortunately, because of that, we don't ever really get to any solution. But absolutely, State Against Blacks, anybody that hasn't checked it out, if it was never a point that a time that it wasn't relevant. I mean, I think it's always relevant, but for sure now it's about as relevant as it's going to get.
Yeah, and I feel like Walter's analysis, which is just sort of a classic critique of unchecked government power, I feel like that very much influences the framework that you used. I watched you on Stu's show, and for people that don't know, both myself and Eric are contributors on Blaze TV, as is Stu, and you laid it out so succinctly in a way I hadn't really thought about phrasing it that way, but you compare racism and statism. Tell me what the difference is.
Yeah, I mean, look, a lot of what people discuss and a lot of their gripes. Now, I'm not going to say every single person's, any groups, like their gripes are all legitimate. I would never pretend that is the case. But when it comes to the ones that are, or at least have some sort of truth to it, often those two get conflated with each other as far as what's actually the core issue. And to me, this is why I think that it's never an actual solution that's being created. I said, and I've always said, that racism without statism is nothing more than a bad idea. It is one thing for the guy down the street to dislike me because I'm black, or not want to sell his goods to me because I'm black. Why I want to line that guy's pocket anyway, I don't know. But it's one thing for that to happen. It's another when you have this, you have like the state, right? And you have this like territorial monopoly on ultimate decision making. It's completely different. And when you look at even racism in this country and some of the legitimate gripes that we've historically had, when you acknowledge the history of this country, Jim Crow, let's start with slavery. That's the obvious one. It was all state sanctioned. You know what I mean? State sanctioned and state endorsed. Black codes, slave codes, all of that. Jim Crow, all the places versus Ferguson. This was like from the local level all the way up to the federal level, and it was state sanctioned and state endorsed racism, and that's what made it so bad and so difficult for it to combat, and it was able to maintain itself for a very, very long time when you consider it in the context of this country. But that's why. That's why, because the state facilitated it and the state endorsed it and the state sanctioned it. And I think, unfortunately, we get so caught up. Now, that's not to say that people aren't racist. That's not to say there aren't racist people out there. But what we're missing out of all of this, and because the whole entire narrative, the entire conversation right now has turned into just blue versus black, or more so in this case, it's more white, particularly against black. And it's like, well, that's not really going to solve the issue. And this is why we have all of these we want to send them a new set of rules they don't follow. Like, there's an issue with this institution, and until that is like addressed, and it comes on different sides. It's the communities have to see it one way, or more so a different way, instead of expecting them to move their world for them, which sort of to them it legitimizes the police force in those areas. You know what I mean? So we have to address that problem, and I never want to lose sight. This is why I've been I mean, I hate to use the term aggressive in a libertarian, but I don't mean it in the libertarian sense. You know what I mean? But I've been so aggressive in attacking this issue because I want to get it back on the rails. Why? Because not only just because of the craziness that's going on in the world right now, but mainly because I want people to see it for what it is, so we can actually get, if you're fed up, if people want these solutions, if we can't have that conversation, honestly, we're going to revisit this again. Rodney King thing, that was 30 years ago, man. Like, it was 30 years ago when that was probably the most similar thing to this, where you had, it wasn't just, I mean, we look at the LA riots, but it wasn't just LA that was, mad at it. Or you look at what happened when Dr. King passed, you know what I mean? Like, not passed, was murdered. When you look at that, it's the same thing back then. It was like, we're still revisiting this stuff, and it's 2020, and it's sad. But the reason is we're not attacking the core issue. We're attacking this. It's I don't want to say it's an invisible man, because it is a thing that exists, but it's an invisible man in terms of, like, it's a very hard thing to combat, but we know what's causing the destruction, but we just keep talking around it.
Yeah. Another way to put that is that we're not fighting race. Well, we're fighting racism, but we're not fighting the institutionalizing of racism through the power of government to use their monopoly on force to do things like happened to George Floyd.
Bingo. That's perfectly put. It's just it just hits different. Like, we talked about this, on the Blaze when I loved it, having a great roundtable discussion, even getting guys like Chad, Prather to look at it like, man, I probably would have pulled my gun on that cop. And I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, think about that. Okay, look, we all agree that if we just walk, now I'm not going to say everybody has a duty to try to stop a crime or something like that, but you can imagine with all of those people around, if those guys were just citizens or just regular guys, it's 3 of them total on them, right? Somebody maybe would have broke it up, done something, said something. It wouldn't have went down like it did, but everybody has that hesitation, and it's not even a hesitation. It's like, we just won't do it. Now, why that is the case is the issue here. It's because we see it, that institution, that it is above what anything else that we can do. You know what I mean? They have a special set of rules that allows them to do things that we otherwise, could not do. But that hesitation right there, or the fact that people just like, I use that comparison because I want people to see, like, we recognize a wrong here, right? We all recognize this is wrong reaction, but what actually was it that made you? Because if you see the videos that were out, definitely the main one that was shot, you hear people in the background like, stop, like, what are you doing? Like, that's a completely different conversation. It's more action. He probably gets bump rushed, in if this was just regular guys, but we don't do that. And it's a tough conversation because it's uncomfortable for a lot of people. And I get it. Definitely for a lot of people that have grown up seeing, government, or more so seeing police officers as one way. It's a very uncomfortable conversation for a lot of people to have, but it's one that needs to happen. Otherwise, we're going to revisit. We can sit up here and talk, they can march to the wheels fall off, get all the exercise they want. And none of that's going to change anything if we don't start looking at the core issue. We're going to revisit this again. All of the I get it, all the black boxes and all of that stuff. That's great, right? Everybody's just standing in solidarity. That's fantastic. But it doesn't necessarily solve the issue at all, actually, I would argue. And we're losing sight of that because we're not even discussing it. The conversation isn't even being had. Maybe guys like us have it, but but at a more national scale. That's the more difficult thing, and that's why I've been trying my hardest to position myself more so to have conversations, not with people that maybe agree all the time, but trying to position myself. And this is what I've always thought libertarians should be able to do, or should be trying to do. We don't have to try to, do a political posturing. We don't have to pander. We don't have to do any of that. We can position ourselves, or definitely individual creators and influencers and advocates and activists can position ourselves to have that conversation, because I think everybody's ripe for it, but we're not having it. And who's that's a failure on, I really don't know, but I really want to have it because I want to get to the solutions.
Yeah, I do see, and it seems to happen with every freaking issue, that it seems like the same sort of tribal dividing lines that we were fighting about over the government lockdowns under COVID prevention have reemerged, and no one's actually talking about the structural problem. And when you tell the story about, the bystanders are pleading with the cops to get off of George Floyd's neck, and they're reinforcing what he's saying: he can't breathe, you're killing him. But in their defense, they probably know either explicitly or in their minds that there are two sets of rules. And if that was just a guy attacking George Floyd, they could tackle him, they could subdue him, and the good guys would actually be celebrated for saving a life. But when it comes to police, there are two sets of rules. We talk about it a lot: qualified immunity, and it seems like this machine that is a monopoly of police force has an ability to get out of these things. And so I understand that they're afraid, and I understand that there would be very much consequences for stopping that cop, because the narrative wouldn't be the same. The narrative was defined by the video that showed that guy murdering Floyd. So the thing that we libertarians bring to this, and I think this is true for progressives on one side, but certainly a lot of the conservatives that you and I speak to, a lot of conservatives have this sort of knee-jerk reaction that the cops are the good guys. Mm-hmm. And I think the bad apples that very much exploit that power give all cops a bad name. Mm-hmm. And the best way to celebrate good cops is to limit their power and hold them more accountable, because I think law enforcement right now is in deep trouble as well.
Oh, most definitely, they're in deep trouble. A lot of people see them as the enemy, and I get it. I absolutely get it. But it's one of those things. Like, do we want to actually start getting to any sort of doing anything like that that's conducive to solving this issue? And I think that's been the difficult conversations that people, you mentioned a lot of conservatives have had knee-jerk reactions. I like to talk about the silver lining in that. I mean, because definitely once we see the other side of this, where you talk about the rioting and the looting and stuff like that, and people's businesses aren't being protected, cops are being told to stand down, or they're just not doing anything. I'm not here to dispute what's the case there. We just know that they're not protecting these businesses. That's what we do know. You know what I mean? And it's like there's an issue there, and we're seeing different sides for different reasons understand that there's an issue there. The problem is, what I see, I don't see this getting better, and I'm not trying to be a pessimist to anybody. I'm just saying I don't see this getting better on the other side of this, mainly because of where the narrative went so fast, and it got out of control so fast that it was like we saw white cop, black man, right? And so quickly, I mean, I guess we should have known that it was going to lead the narrative, but I maybe kind of underestimated it, because I didn't think it was going to be to this degree that we have all of these. I mean, it's like a corporate thing, right? It's a corporate thing. It's a lot of bandwagonery. It's a lot of similar to the COVID-19 stuff. And it's just it's like it controls the conversation. And then I sit in, I'm on Twitter or I'm on whatever, and I see all the signaling, and it's hardly anybody ever talking about the actual issue. Like I just talked to you're a music guy as well. I talked to well, I didn't talk to Loudwire as of when we taped this. Loudwire, who we personally were on. They did. I don't know if they even still do it, but they used to do this like battle royale thing for all the videos in the middlecore, hardcore scene. And the fans would go vote for what was the top video. They would put the articles out and stuff like that. You get to vote and all that, yada, yada. My band, and backwards, when we dropped the Statism, I think it was, we ended up topping that, beating out all the bands on this scene for 5 weeks. So it's not like they didn't know who we were, right? They know exactly who we were. And I'm sitting here watching the entire music industry, at least in our scene, right? Get all of these guys, and no disrespect to, white folk, but it's so odd how that's the one conversation. They're getting all these, and everybody's signaling like, we have to stand, we have to do something. Not being racist is not good enough. Same old generic bull crap. And I posted this to people that were following me, and I was like, guess how many of these publications have reached out to me? 0. You can't say they don't know I exist. Alternative Press had that band Straight from the Path. They ended up dropping they dropped a song called Good Night All Right. It's the corniest song that I like. No, none of us obviously care about all right. Just a corny, cheesy signal of a song. All I said was like 3 words on Twitter. I said, sigh, ... Straight from the Path. They had absolutely no problem quoting me in the article, saying that the scene reacts to this song that came out. Nobody has reached. I'm the one guy in the scene that has I'm black, right? I front a semi-popular band that's in the same. You can't. It's not like they don't know we exist. They've already covered us. You covered our singles. You released our singles. You cover all of them. Not all of them, but for the big ones. Alternative Press was gonna get Loudwire. This is a pretty Metal Injection. Like, these are pretty big thing. They've all covered us. So. Not my email didn't ring. I got a text from one of our managers. He said, "Now, Loudwire, I want to talk," because I quote tweeted him. I was like, because they said some Avenged Sevenfold frontman talks about, oh, this is why Black Lives Matter. So I quote tweeted him. I said, "Y'all know who we are. I love to discuss this issue with you." And that's when they hit me up, because I had to put them on blast. But it was never a thought to even reach out to me. And I'm not trying to pretend like I'm the most popular guy. What I'm saying is, it's indicative of how they're trying to control the narrative that is. Like, it's an allowable opinion that everybody has. And that's honestly why there's no solution. It's like, I get what y'all talking. Y'all talking about the same thing y'all been talking about. Generic phrases, hashtags. I get all the awareness, all that protest. That's fine. We've been doing this for I don't know how long. Like, how long have we been doing this? And has it gotten you a solution? No. But they're not even trying to. It's like they pretend like it doesn't even exist. They like to think it. And how it got that way, I don't know. I'm not really concerned. I'm trying to position myself so we can have this conversation at a more national scale, because I do think if we can get them at the table, they'll hear us out. It's like, it makes sense. It's not like what we're saying is just insane. It makes sense, but they're not even trying to have the conversation. The conversation is being geared one way, and then you have the direct opposite side, where they take opposite sides out of spite, even if it's wrong. This is what we see with a lot of knee-jerk reactions sometimes, out of not necessarily as much on this. I think a lot of people, for the most part, unanimously agreed that there was something wrong here, at least. But in a lot of cases, knee-jerk reaction, it's always to defend that institution, just because the other side is it's saying, oh, they're wrong, tear it down, yada yada. We're not getting any solutions. None of this is conducive to actually solving this, and that's what I want to get to. I'm trying so hard to get there.
Yeah, some of the I feel like it's super trite. Some of the virtue signaling coming from the music industry is super frustrating right now, because they do have a megaphone. They have a cultural megaphone. And part of it seems to be that they've been infected with the same sort of clickbait culture that drives mainstream media, where if they actually force you to think, and they say something that's outside of this two-team tribal narrative thing, they're not going to get as many clicks. But the other piece of this, and I don't know how you feel about this, but But so much of this, like the lockdowns, seem inherently political. People are so pissed off at Trump. And I'm not even a Trump supporter, but I see this dynamic that
Right.
I feel like every national crisis is now exaggerated and prolonged and inflamed simply so that we can blame Trump for the whole thing.
Absolutely. I mean, you are 1,000% correct. And we'd be fools not to, even as non-Trump supporters, we'd be fools not to acknowledge that that's going on. We're seeing it now. People are, no matter what it is that he does, it's like it's the worst thing ever. It's to blame him or this is on your head. Had nothing to do with me. To be fair to him, and I hate to even be fair to him, he had nothing to do with what happened in Minneapolis. It has nothing to do with it. He doesn't govern there. He governs over the country in terms of being the president, but that's all Minneapolis. Like that's on, they have a mayor, you know what I mean? They have a city council. They have all of these. They have the police chiefs. That's on them. Like that's more so on them. And somehow I would see comments on Twitter about people like, well, this is what you created. I'm like, what the? That doesn't even make sense. But that's what that's a discussion. That's the type of silly discussions that we're having. It's like, whose fault is it? You know, is it Trump's fault? Trump didn't do something. He should have did something. And when he does something, he did too much. That he got one side saying bring the National Guard, other side's out of control. Other side says no. If he even seems to like threaten it, they act like, oh man, it's about to be he's gonna start shooting like the National Guard is about to start killing everybody or something like that. And it's like, this isn't even about George Floyd anymore. Like this isn't even about, I wish we don't have to pretend. I certainly won't. I ain't been pretending at all. This ain't about that anymore. I think that there are people that are protesting that are keeping them in their hearts and minds. I wouldn't even, I would not say that there are people that have great intentions that are maybe misguided. I'm over the mark. I'm gonna be honest. Even from a peaceful protest point, I'm not saying that people don't have the right to do that. I just don't think it's conducive to solving this problem. We've been marching. I'm tired of marching. I'm tired of awareness. Like, what exactly is the signs and stuff is that going to do as far as preventing something like this from happening again? And to me, it's nothing. We've been doing that already. And it seems like a lot of it is political. And a lot of it's political posturing done by way of politicians, depending on what side they are, what color they rock, what, if they have an R next to their name, if they have a D next to their name. And people do that, or take positions based upon that. And it's a very frustrating thing to see unfold, because I called this early, like really early on. I was like, this is going to get to a level that, for one, they might not ever be able to control, but it's going to get to a level to like incentivize almost the people that are being caught in the crowd. People's businesses are. It's really heartbreaking for me to look at that. So some of those videos, when I see people of different age, race, demographics, so forth, that are having their businesses destroyed. Shared a video yesterday. Black woman in Bronx, part owner of this like shop. They messed the stove up top to bottom. And she's like, y'all talking about Black Lives Matter. Like, what about, I'm a part owner of this stove and look what you did to me. And you have blue check marks on Twitter sitting here either justifying it or excusing it as if you can't. And this goes to the political element. We have these false dichotomies and false choices that are foisted upon us, where it's like, and it's funny as hearing us libertarians say it, it's because like, I can absolutely condemn state aggression while also understanding that rioting, or more so looting, destroying people's property, are bad things. I'm not forced to choose between the two. Who made that rule? And it's like, you talk about one and they're like, well, what about, the people's like, what about them? Like, it's funny hearing it say to me, of all people, you ain't gonna find probably another person on the internet that hates the state more than I do. Like, I dare you to try to find one. It's certainly one more consistent. I spent for the better part of this decade touring the country, dropping 18-track albums, doing all of this, talking about it's funny, we backwards. We've been talking about this all week about backwards has a song for that. I literally say, I dropped self-ownership in 2016, and I literally say, for example, when a cop shoots a black man, you focus on the racism, ignoring all the statism. Like I did that 4 years ago. Like I was talking about this very instance playing. I said, holding signs, rioting is not about to save them because you must have forgot that that's the power that you gave them. I'd been saying this for the longest, and this is what, for lack of better terms, triggers me out of the industry because they hated us for it. Like backwards had a target on our back everywhere we went, everything, because this scene hated us because we were the ones they were all Bernie, for the most part, all Bernie bros. There we got up there and said, like, yeah, you might not like Trump, but if you think he's the start and the end of this, you sleep. They would hate us for it. They hated us for it. And I'm sitting there arguing with all these guys in the scene for the most part, same guys who have been advocating for big, you don't get much more big government than a Bernie Sanders type. And then for them to turn around and try to like act as if they're able to position themselves to say all cops are bastards or anything like that is laughable to me when they advocate for policies that are diametrically opposed to, not especially when we talk about in some of these communities. You mentioned Walter Williams. You mentioned Walter Williams and the State Against Blacks, and long talking about minimum wage laws and how that is still to this day screwing over young black folks, and because they go to these rotten schools, that's not where they're going to learn any sort of valuable skill set to be valuable more so in the workplace. They need to work. And all that does is prices them out of the market. So these guys talk about doubling that. These same industry guys talking about more taxation, which are all these different new laws and new things that, because they think they have a good heart, incentivizes more and more conflict with the state, it more so hurts these guys economically. And for them to try to do this political posturing now, because it's socially acceptable to act like you're mad about something, it's hilariously dishonest to me, because again, they advocate things that are diametrically opposed.
Yeah, that disconnect, and we've talked a lot about sort of the ultimate contradiction in sort of democratic socialism, the way Bernie Sanders sells it, and AOC to a less extent. I think Bernie is probably more intellectually interesting because he is very much a critic of permanent war. He's a critic of the police state. He's a critic of the war on drugs. He's a critic of mass incarceration. But his solution for everything is to expand the exact state power that created those situations in the first place. And I've always viewed that as an opportunity to get people to sort of follow the logic a little bit more, but I see the same sort of failure to think through things when it comes to being angry about police violence and the militarization of police, as if that's not intimately and directly associated with the fact that government's too big and has too much power and spends too much of your money. They constantly don't get that, and I don't know about you, Eli. So I want to take a step back. I love peaceful protests, and I think civil disobedience, when it's done well, is a great way to sort of galvanize public support and get the attention of the political class. We haven't done it on this, definitely not this time, but I think always the protests against police violence have been corrupted by people that aren't peaceful protesters, people that aren't looking for institutional change. And in this particular case, I think I sort of divided them into three groups of people arbitrarily. There's good people out there protesting a really horrible thing that happened to a black man, and I'm with those guys,
right?
Regardless of whether or not it's effective. They're doing the right thing and they're doing it for the right reason. And then there's the looters who are just opportunists. I don't know why exactly they're doing what they're doing. I think the lockdowns have something to do with that. But the people that really piss me off are the professional provocateurs, the Antifa activists who very much believe that violence is somehow going to get them to their socialist dream world. And those people are specifically undermining the cause of George Floyd. They're also, by the way, creating an environment where the police are going to have more weapons and more power and more leeway to stomp on innocent individual lives coming out of this.
Yeah, they're giving them a reason, right? And that's unfortunate. I'm pretty sure we both have seen videos of some little scrawny white kid with a skateboard bashing a window, and then some black dude comes and snatches it from him. Like, what are you doing? Right? I saw one other one.
You're making us look bad.
Yeah, right. I saw another one. A group of I guess it was a group of these types that were in a car, gives a brick to a group of black dudes, and a black woman gets the brick, walks next to the car, gives it back to, like, well, why in the world would you give them that? Like, and I'm seeing all these videos, people getting body slammed as they're trying to, you see videos, guys trying to break up like concrete and stuff like that, and then they end up getting smacked up by the crowd. There are some people that are like, they at least recognize that it's wrong. Like, they're like, and they're obviously conscious of the fact that that group of people are making them look bad and are undermining the cause. And it's a very unfortunate situation. And that's what these Antifa types, these little fake anarchist types. I know they're not going to like me for saying that. They're going to bring up the etymology of the term. But certainly those types who hijack these sort of movements to do exactly that. They want to tear it down. They're not interested in anything else but using this as an opportunity to, and this is why it's another side. It's these other guys who maybe not associated with those maybe Antifa types, those guys that are just being in it, these guys that are even in those communities, being very opportunistic guys. And then again, you have the Antifa type. So you have these guys that are both being opportunistic, which are undermining the people that have good intentions, that have every intention more so of being peaceful. No matter how I feel about their effectiveness of what it is that they're going to do, I'm not a fool enough to, I obviously will admit if there's we had a protest out here in Frisco, where I'm at in Texas, nothing happened. They protested. I mean, aside from them, it being annoying that they picked the most busiest road to do it. So you kind of got to drive around it. But aside from that, no property damage, no nothing. It was it. We know that there are people that are out there like that, but there are unfortunately those who are looking to use this as an opportunity to cause destruction to people. And this is why you have a lot of people that are innocent. Obviously these businesses weren't the one that had their knee on that man's neck, on George Floyd's neck. It's unfortunate because it does undermine it, because we have to talk about it. I can't. I know people get frustrated, like, what do you mean why I'm talking about, when I know people's personal businesses down in uptown in Dallas that get what you mean? Why am I talking about it? Of course I'm going to talk about it. We out here in Dallas. I'm not even in Minneapolis. And we're seeing this sort of stuff happen. And again, what frustrates me the most is the people that excuse and justify. Like, I'm seeing people that are in positions of power, house on the hill. And I ain't disrespecting nobody on the house over here. I mean, if I could live on the house on the hill, I'd do that as well. I'd be living in a great area. You know what I mean? But what I'm saying is they're going to suffer the least. They're going to suffer the least. The people that are going to suffer are the folks in these communities. Like, I watched that, again, the black woman that was out of Bronx. She's like, we're trying to build this community up, but y'all tearing it down.
Yeah.
That's not helping anything. Like, these fools sit up here and be like, well, they got insurance. It can be replaced. It's almost like they have absolutely no idea how business or commercial insurance works. What you think they can just quantify everything or put everything, expense it all out, and then an insurance company just writes them a big fat check the next day. We got people out here in the South that had tornadoes last year. And they still processing them claims. So what makes them think that it's gonna definitely, with all of them are happening at the same time, that it's just gonna be a cut and dry, everything gets paid for? I mean, I'm not even mentioning the fact of people that didn't have the type of insurance that would cover something like this anyway. But never mind even that. Think about, even from a bigger spot, a grocer, right? Those people that need to shop there. What about the people that need milk, food? You know, looted out the entire Target that they may have gotten their stuff from. And man, hopefully there's a store near that they can go to. But I watched another thing. I can't remember what city it was. A woman was crying on TV. She's like, the buses are running. I live in this community. I walk everywhere. They done tore down a Dollar Tree, all these different places where I get my stuff. Where am I supposed to go? That doesn't even process in these guys' mind. These people also employ people like, Killer Mike was talking about it in Atlanta. He's like, how do I tell people? I know three black business owners that have their businesses destroyed. It's not just their businesses, the owners. Also, what about the employees that work there? You know, they're out of jobs now. They're not thinking it through, and it's a chain reaction of people that are being negatively impacted. I don't know why everybody thinks every business owner is just rich. I speak out of this in experience. Well, my woman, when they're in the franchise owners, they work out of the store. The black woman I was talking about in the Bronx, she's a part owner. She's also a part-time worker. Like, even if you own a business, that doesn't mean you rich. That don't mean you like to just eat up the cost of your whole entire business you can't even operate it. Like, this is a serious issue, and it's going to continue to escalate until we can have that conversation and people actually, well, I think for one, people are going to have to start defending their property, unfortunately, because they're suddenly realizing the cops ain't going to do it for them. But on a serious note, you have people that are in positions of power that are egging this stuff on, that are being provocateurs and actually encouraging this bad behavior. And it makes sense when you consider that they're going to be the ones that are least impacted.
Yeah, they don't have to live in those communities, and you're talking about these minority communities, these struggling communities, these developing communities, and the big box stores, the Targets and the Dollars, they may not come back because they don't need to have a store there. They can open a store somewhere else. The small businesses that have been destroyed may not be able to come back because insurance rates may go up in a way that makes their business unviable, assuming that insurance even pays. And I think about this as sort of a 1-2 punch. If you really wanted to destroy economic opportunity in struggling communities in America, the lockdown combined with what's happening now makes it virtually impossible for me to imagine how a quick recovery is possible, because the lockdowns had already broken a lot of businesses. And I want to talk about that because I haven't heard this part of the story enough. You probably know this part of the story, but George Floyd lost his job. He was a bouncer at a restaurant bar in Minneapolis, and the governor of Minnesota, a lockdown Democrat, it does seem to be a blue versus red thing when it came to lockdowns. He shut it all down. And he probably embraced that same narrative. If we can just save just one life, without even considering the fact that he was not only destroying businesses, let's put those aside for a second. He put George Floyd out of work. 70 days later, he was arrested for allegedly trying to pass off a counterfeit $20 bill to buy something at a market. And I'm not even convinced he was doing that. If he was doing that.
We don't really know. We don't really know if that was even truly the case, right?
But we do know that he had lost his job because the government decided that his job wasn't important enough to allow. And I keep thinking about this same abuse of government power. You know, we had these lockdowns and stay-at-home mandates. You know, people were literally getting arrested for being out on the street in some of these states. And then we have these same sorts of mandates in the form of curfews.
Curfews, yep.
And do people not notice that it's the same damn thing where some faceless politician, you don't even know who this guy is, just deems that you will not do this because I've decided. And that sort of the economic consequences of that very much led to that confrontation that killed George Floyd.
That doesn't even cross their mind. And I'll tell you, if you needed any more proof, look no further than the fact that it's the same group of people that were against the lockdowns that right after this went down. Now all of a sudden they're encouraging protests. So I don't know if the virus doesn't work at protests or something like that. I'm not gonna. Maybe they have the same magic Walmart doors that nobody got the virus at their Lowe's or the same. Maybe they made of the same stuff or have the same protection. I'm not sure. But if you look no further than that, if you want to see if they're like willing to do whatever, no matter how hypocritical it is, they don't care. They don't care. They don't care. It's a lot of this, and this is what politics has become. Unfortunately, I don't know if it's the growth of social media, what is to blame, but it's just a lot of posturing, and a lot of people do that for the sake of signaling to whatever group they do. And this isn't this thing that's exclusively to the guys that wear blue. You know, red folk do it all the time as well, where either it does nothing or more so it hurts. You know what I mean? And it's like, well, they can pass it off with great rhetoric. We're saving lives. We're all in this together, all of this stuff. And it doesn't matter the economic consequences when people have to suffer. It's like, whatever. It doesn't even cross their mind. Libertarian. We've been calling out. I was talking about this for 3 months. The virus stuff before even the first lockdown came down. I was already analyzing the data, and I was like, if they were gonna do a quarantine, it would have made more sense to do one targeted. Like if they were gonna, I'm not advocating that they did it anyway, like not forcefully. I'm just saying if people wanted to quarantine themselves, nursing homes or whatever, that's perfectly, I understand that. But to treat it's like embodies, right, everything like what we talk about, the inefficiency of government, where you have a clear and obvious demographic that is the most vulnerable, right? Clear and obvious. You got data from Italy, got data from South Korea, got data from, you don't trust the Chinese numbers, but the Chinese numbers said the same exact thing. You know exactly who is most vulnerable. But instead of actually building some sort of plan that would address them, protect them, you put a place to one size fits all lockdown. It deemed certain people as essential and then put 40 million people out of work in the result. And an unfortunate thing is that most of the people, per 100,000, no matter where you look, most of the people that are being hospitalized or dying are people well over retirement age. And it's like, you put all of these people out of work for what? Even though the data was available to you. So that right there got me up in arms. And then to see the reaction of some of these groups with their own communities being burned into the ground, and because they so afraid to actually condemn two things. Even Obama did a better job of them in doing that. At least Obama had enough sense to be like, yeah, this was an injustice, but y'all shouldn't do that, right? Even he had enough sense to do that. These guys leading these governors, mayors, representatives, and so forth are egging these folks on that are destroying people's private property as if it's something that just has to happen. And then had the nerve to act like, if me, I've been on the defend yourself by all means. Korean rooftop Koreans back in style, 1992. Like, do what you got to do. If you're I'm in Texas, you know what I'm saying? We ain't no duty to retreat out here. You know what I mean? And you got to do what you got to do on a serious note, because the cops aren't going to do it for you. And dare I had that position right back to the false dichotomy. Well, you don't care about this black man that was murdered by police. I'm like, dude, I do this 365 days throughout the year. You cannot lecture me on that. I've been trying to warn you. I even wrote songs about it. I gave you something to groove to about this, and you didn't listen. And people long before me were saying the same thing, and here we are. A lot of people out of work, and now you hit it perfectly. It was a double whammy. It was those small businesses that were getting. I know even clinics out here. My own woman's clinic furloughed down almost their entire staff over this because they, no elective procedures. How are we gonna pay the workers? You know what I mean? Because we were expecting this big influx of patients that never came, and then they got denied for the small business loans. So it's like, look at it. Look at this. You're creating these issues. You got a double whammy. right after that, and then they trying to bounce, slowly reopening, right? People trying to bounce back, and then you got folks burning their cities into the ground. But it's not just that. It's that people are justifying it and excusing. And where does this all stem? We're not directly looking at the issue and pointing to the aggressors as them being the issue and the problem. So it's like, again, the invisible man. It's it's just racism, just one word, racism. We're fighting against racism. I'm like, what exactly does that mean in the context of what happened? You know what I mean? Like, in the context of what happened, in the context of actually building some sort of solution, what does that mean? It's such an easy thing to say, well, I'm against racism. We're all against that. You know what I mean? Like, what are you saying, man? Like, I understand. I get that, but it would force them. And this is why I don't think that they are so, or more so why they're so feisty against folks like myself and even, obviously you, that will talk about this, this aggression. I think the reason they don't want to face it is because they have positions, you mentioned like Bernie Sanders, that are diametrically opposed to solving the issue. And dealing with that issue of statism forces them to have to drop those issues, and they don't want to meet it. And they don't have to, because the conservatives certainly aren't doing a great job of holding their feet to the fire in that regards. And unfortunately, libertarians don't even have a seat, and we're not even able to be a part of the conversation.
I think you mentioned the responsibility of self-defense, because the police aren't going to do it for you, and the government's not going to do it for you. I think that is a application of a broader principle that gets down to individual responsibility and even localism. One of the proposals that I saw that I thought made a lot of sense to me instinctually is that cops should actually work in the neighborhoods that they live in. And when you bring in cops from out of city, out of state, you run into all sorts of problems because they don't have a connection with that community. But I think the libertarian attitude on that would be, let's apply that to everything. We don't want a governor deciding whether or not a hospital should permit certain types of patients to come during COVID. We don't want a governor deciding whether or not that business is appropriate to stay open or has to be closed. Communities have that knowledge. They have that responsibility, and free people actually will take care of each other. Our positive answer for all of this raging that we're doing on this show is that if you would leave people alone, we could solve all sorts of problems, frankly, including racism.
Yeah,
we could do that.
Absolutely. It's getting closer to the individual. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, stop help. That's the key thing. Is like stop it. You're making it worse. Yeah. But the localization, the decentralization, it's just like one of the core. I think where a lot of most libertarians, if not all, can at least agree that that's a solution towards working towards a freer society. In terms of putting it to action, that's easy. It's not going to be a light. I don't believe that we're going to ever get to a libertarian society by way of a light switch. It's not going to happen. It was some foolish libertarians, I will say, on this thing that they thought, oh, well, the precincts and stuff are being set on fire. They got and then this thing started to escalate, and they own people's businesses being set on fire. It's like, oh, maybe they didn't have the right. I was like, bro, I told y'all that. Like, that wasn't. We're not talking about what's the core issue here. It's about getting folks to recognize that, it goes to the individual's responsibility, and the closer you can get definitely those positions of power to those individuals, the better that is going to get to causing to sort of creating any sort of solution to it. You know what I mean? The people that are actually there, that are in your community, it makes no sense why someone in DC that I've never met is making decisions on my behalf. Doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sort of sense that happens. We want to get it more localized, and I think that decentralization and that element is going to solve a lot of these issues, a lot of, if not all of these issues, and it just doesn't apply to this. It applies to a lot of these different things. This is why I always let even the so sympathetic and empathetic socialists, right? I'm like, you know what? If you wanted to build your own little co-op or own little deal where you and I might think it might economically be a disaster when it's all said and done. But if you wanted to do that, you should have the freedom to be able to do that. Just don't force me to be a part of it. You know what I mean? I want to get it as close, when it comes to that power, I want to get it to as close to the individual as possible. And we can apply that principle, like you just said, to generally everything. As far as what we see that's wrong with the world, a lot of people that are making decisions on these people's behalf are not even connected. They're completely out of touch. They know they're completely out of touch. They don't live near you. They don't live in your communities. They actually despise your community. They only show up in a some sort of photo op, and if they are, they're surrounded by security and all the stuff that you don't got, And they're making decisions on your behalf, and it sucks. This is why they're so out of touch. You sit there and wonder. You're like, how could something like this be so wrong? And that's why they're out of touch. They literally don't know. They don't know. So we want to get that power back to the decentralization has been the issue, right? We want to get it. We want to get it decentralized. We want to get it closer to the individual. And absolutely, in the case of the police, localization is where it's at. Like, localization is going to be where it's at. It's going to be a lot more efficient. We've seen that even working with private institutions when it comes to what happened with the private groups out of Detroit. You know what I mean? That are policing apartment complexes and stuff like that. They were like, hey, give us an apartment, and instead of obviously charging them rent, give us an apartment, pay us a little bit, and we'll make it happen. And it's more efficient than anything the police are gonna do with their over policing. And when they're over policing, they're policing things that, in a lot of cases, have absolutely nothing to do with it. There's no aggression. There's nonviolent crimes and stuff like that, and turning a blind eye in a lot of cases to the actual aggressors in a lot of cases. We got to get it closer to the individual, but it's about us having a seat at the table, because that doesn't even cross their mind, man. I have too many conversations with people, or people stumble across my work and they're like, I've never even heard someone say that. And when I hear that, I'm like, as loud as I am, right? As like, I ain't one to hold no words. You know what I mean? I got all these videos and stuff like that. And I'm like, man, you mean to tell me you've never heard that perspective? And I try to, that's why I'm all about culture. We talked about on the last time I was on the show. And that's why I think the battle is going to be won. And it's positioning ourselves so we can actually be a part of the conversation, because we're not at it. The conversation is being had between two parties. And I'm not necessarily saying political parties. I'm saying whether you deal with mainstream progressivism or mainstream conservatism, they're the ones with the seats at the table. And there's, differences and so forth, but they're the ones with the seats at the table, and they're arguing, and we don't have a seat at the table. And I would argue that's why we're not getting to any solutions, because those two generally have, even if they could properly identify the problem, the solution almost is always worse.
That's why I love the fact that you use your band and your music and your lyrics to turn on people. I would call them liberty curious, because they've probably never heard the word libertarian. They've never heard those ideas. We're running out of time, but I definitely want to get a quick update on Backwards, and for people that don't know your music, where they can find it.
You can obviously go to backwordsmusic.com. That's BACKWORDZ music.com. Backwards Music is also the handle as far as YouTube. You can hit us up on Twitter, all of that, all the YouTube, Spotify's of the world, iTunes. We're on every major digital platform, music videos, all of that stuff. You can check it out. As far as what we got going, I know everybody's anticipating, that certainly knows us, is anticipating the sophomore album. And it's, for the most part, funny. We're having this interview yesterday. We had a big conference call talking about the album, as far as getting some ideas for the first singles and all of that. The album, for the most part, is done. There are some things that we need to add, but the album is, for the most part, done. It's just, as far as how we release it, it's tough, because we don't know how this virus thing is going to impact the market in terms of touring. So we don't know. Yeah. Like, nobody knows. This is why you see so many musicians in our position that are reluctant to drop, because we don't know how what like, it would be like career suicide for us, definitely, to release a sophomore album and not be able to get on the road. Now, we do have the luxury of having some musicianship, right? We can do a lot of different things. If you heard our sound, you know that whatever we feel like sounding like that day is how it's going to sound, and we're not limited to anything. Rap doesn't matter. We want to do a full hardcore song, make it a little more punk, like a little more medical, whatever we want to do. So We are, and I announced this not too long ago. I am going to be putting out some strictly rap stuff to hold a lot of guys off between the album. We can't give them a date because we don't know, and I'm going to be completely transparent about that. But I want to give them something. So I'm in the process of setting up my studio in the other room, and I'm going to be dropping a lot of rap stuff to hold these guys over. And that's what's on the agenda. And we're finishing up our songs. Just had a great conference call yesterday, and we're finishing up our songs. And I can't wait for people to listen to it. If they thought the first one was nice, I mean, wait till they hear the second one. It's gonna absolutely blow your minds. But it's just we can't put a date, we can't put a timestamp on it because, and we're glad we actually didn't, because the virus hit. It would have been silly if we'd have dropped. Well, where we're gonna drop one this upcoming month, and then nobody can predict a pandemic's going to hit or anything like that. But it's on retrospect, I'm glad we did. But we'll have something to hold these guys off till the album drops.
Cool. And let me know, because I definitely want to share that stuff with our audiences as well. They love the last album, and I got a lot of feedback from our last show. And by the way, I have to thank you for joining Blaze TV, because on occasion I feel like the lonely libertarian. So there's at least two of us, and I think there's a lot of other of our colleagues that are very much liberty curious, and I just love that you're on there. And I heard you say this somewhere, but I've never been told what not to say. I'm free to be myself, and I just love being part of that family.
That's what makes the Blaze unique, and that's what makes it great. And I want to be as clear as day. I've been appearing on Blaze shows since forever. And rest in peace, obviously, even when Doc Thompson was there, you know what I mean? Long before that, I've been appearing. So I had all the time in the world to vet them before I officially came on. And during all those instances, never once did they ever just say, hey, stop, don't say that. It was never that. They've never tried to silence me or anything like that. They've been a lot open. They know where I'm at. They know I'm an anarcho-capitalist, and that's what makes this family certainly awesome, because like you said, they're all liberty curious, and at minimum willing to hear us out. And unfortunately, I cannot say that about some of the other guys. Again, same thing. I've never been invited to any of their forums or roundtable discussions or anything like that over to the guys on the other side. So I do appreciate that out of Blaze. Okay,
Eric. Thanks for all that, and we got to do this more often. I think it's been too long since we talked.
Absolutely, man. Let's do it again.
Okay, thanks, Ed. Thanks for watching Kibbe on Liberty. By now, you know this is the most important event of your week, so make sure you subscribe on YouTube. Click the little bell so you get notifications. Kibbe on Liberty, mostly honest conversations with mostly interesting people.